Right now, tragedy in Shreveport. A mass shooting has left 8 children dead. Police say the shooting happened early this morning on West 79th Street in the Cedar Grove neighborhood. It appears to have stemmed from a domestic dispute, with the violence spanning multiple locations across several parishes.
Now to some heartbreaking news. Our nation saw its deadliest mass shooting in years when a Louisiana man shot and killed 8 children this morning. Tonight we're learning more about that gunman, Shamar Elkins, who was the father of 7 of those 8 slain children. Tonight, the community of Shreveport has been left shattered. The children, 3 boys and 5 girls, ranging in age from 3 to 11.
This is not a freaking joke. This is real, and this is the result when someone snaps.
I was just with my grandbabies the other day, and we was having so much fun. And I say, for any grandparent out there, be happy. Be happy with your grandkids and have fun with them. I'm just praying that everything will be all right for my daughter. She's in the hospital right now. She's fighting.
Tragedy in Louisiana. 8 children were shot and killed, others left wounded in the nation's deadliest shooting in more than 2 years. The scene of the unthinkable crime being described as unlike anything most of the police force had ever seen.
The rain was the only thing loud enough to drown out the silence of the house on 79th Street. On the roof, a 13-year-old boy is pressed against the wet shingles, shivering. Below him, in the darkness of the hallway, he hears the slow, methodical footsteps of his own father. He knows his siblings have stopped screaming. He knows the doors are locked. And he knows he's the only one left. In these photos, Shamar Elkins looks like a man with everything to live for. A U.S. Army veteran, a father of 7, a man of God. But exactly 14 days after this photo was taken, that smile would turn into the face of America's worst nightmare. He didn't just snap, he executed. And he did it while they slept. How does a father go from a church pew to 4 different crime scenes in a single morning? What did he mean when he posted a final plea for his own mind just days before the massacre? And how did a single jump from a roof become the only reason this story is being told today? It is a story of a system that failed, a veteran who snapped, and a night of horror that Louisiana will never forget. Before we dive into the timeline, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into the shadows. And do us a favor. Drop a comment below and let us know where you are watching from. We are a global community looking for the truth. To understand the horror that visited West 79th Street, we first have to travel exactly 0.4 miles east to a small, unassuming residence on Harrison Street. It is 5 a.m. on Sunday, April 19th. The city of Shreveport is still draped in that heavy pre-dawn humidity, the kind of quiet that feels thick and permanent. Most of the neighborhood is in that deep, final cycle of REM sleep, completely unaware that a predator, born from their own community, is already in motion. Shamar Elkins pulls his vehicle to the curb. There is no screeching of tires, no frantic energy. Neighborhood cameras show a man who is chillingly composed. He isn't acting in a heat of passion. He isn't stumbling through a drunken rage. He moves with the tactical precision of the soldier he once was. He knows exactly who is inside that house. A woman he once cared for, the mother of 3 of his own children. He enters the home. There is no evidence of a struggle, no shouting match that woke the neighbors. He finds her in the bedroom. Without a word, he raises a small caliber handgun, a weapon chosen for its portability and perhaps its relative silence. He fires a single round into her head. In the world of criminal psychology, we often look for the break point, that moment where a killer realizes what they've done and either flees in a panic or succumbs to the weight of the act. But Shamar Elkins doesn't break. He stands over the mother of his children, watches her fall, and then he simply turns around. He doesn't check her pulse. He doesn't look for the 3 children sleeping in the other rooms. At least not yet. He walks back out to his car, the damp morning air hitting his face. He settles into the driver's seat, adjusts his mirrors, and puts the car in gear. This wasn't a crime of impulse. It was the first checkpoint on a mental map he had drawn long before the sun came up. He isn't hiding. He isn't looking for an escape route to the state line. Instead, he begins a short, 4-minute drive. To anyone watching, it's just a man driving through his neighborhood in the early morning. But in the passenger seat sits a high-capacity rifle-style pistol, and in his mind, the clearing operation has only just begun. The woman on Harrison Street was just the prelude. The true heart of the darkness is waiting 4 blocks away, behind the door of a house on West 79th Street, where 7 more of his children are still dreaming, unaware that their father is already turning the corner. The drive from Harrison Street to the 300 block of West 79th Street takes less than 2 minutes. It is a straight shot through the heart of Cedar Grove, a neighborhood of modest homes and tight-knit families. Shamar Elkins pulls up to the curb of a house that should have been a sanctuary. Inside, the air is still. His wife, Shaniqua Pugh, is asleep. Along with her are 8 children, a mix of Shamar's own flesh and blood, and their cousins. They are tucked into bunk beds and under colorful quilts, lost in the heavy, undisturbed sleep that only children know. When Shamar enters this second home, he isn't a father returning from a late shift. He is a ghost in the hallway. He moves through the house with a terrifying, quiet efficiency. There is no grand confrontation here, no final plea. Just the cold, mechanical sound of a slide racking and the smell of gunpowder beginning to fill the small rooms. One by one, he finds them. In the darkness, he raises his weapon. Jayla, just 3 years old. Shayla and Braylon, both 5. Kayla and Kadarian, 6. Layla, 7. Markaden, 10. And Soraya, 11. 8 young lives, each one a universe of potential, extinguished in a matter of minutes. This wasn't a crossfire. It wasn't an accident. Forensic investigators would later describe the scenes in those bedrooms as nothing short of an assembly line of death. Most of the children never even had the chance to open their eyes. They passed from one dream into a permanent one, never knowing that the man who had tucked them in just nights before was now the one standing over them in the shadows. But in the back of the house, the silence is broken. A 13-year-old boy, the oldest of the siblings, is jolted awake. He doesn't hear a scream, but he hears the pop of the small-caliber handgun and the heavy rhythmic footsteps of his father moving from room to room of the small-caliber handgun and the heavy rhythmic footsteps of his father moving from room to room. In an instant, the primal instinct of survival overrides everything else. He tries the bedroom door, but he hears his father in the hallway. He tries the back exit, but the layout of the house feels like a cage. He realizes that if he stays on the floor, he dies. In a moment of desperate, adrenaline-fueled clarity, he finds a way up. He scrambles through a window or a crawl space, his fingers gripping the siding of the house until he pulls himself onto the roof. Imagine that visual for a moment. A 13-year-old boy, dressed in his pajamas, crouched on the cold, wet shingles of a roof in the middle of a Louisiana rainstorm. He is flattened against the grid of the roof, his heart hammering against his ribs so loud he's sure his father can hear it through the ceiling. Below him, the house has gone deathly quiet. He can hear the rain hitting the gutters, and then the muffled sound of footsteps moving toward the back of the house. He is trapped between the sky and a massacre. He knows he cannot stay there. If his father comes outside and looks up, it's over. The boy moves to the edge of the roof. He looks down at the rain-slicked grass of the neighbor's yard. It's a significant drop, one that would break the bones of most. But in that moment, the height is nothing compared to the monster inside the walls. He doesn't hesitate. He leaps. He hits the ground hard, the air leaving his lungs, the impact jarring his entire frame. But he doesn't stop to check for injuries. He disappears into the shadows of the neighboring yards, a lone survivor of a bloodline that was, at that very moment, being systematically erased. He is the only witness to the silence of West 79th Street, a silence that would soon be shattered by the sirens of a city that was about to wake up to its darkest day.
The gray house is the house in which 7 children were located inside that were deceased. There was an additional deceased child that looked like he had tried to escape the residence out the back on the roof.
Officers say a second woman was shot and is believed to be the mother of the suspect's children. Both women are now in the hospital in critical condition. Officers fired at the suspect during a chase after he carjacked the vehicle at gunpoint.
After the silence of the house on West 79th Street, Shamar Elkins did not simply wait for the inevitable. The cold, mechanical focus he had displayed since Harrison Street hadn't flickered. He stepped out of the home, leaving a trail of unimaginable destruction behind him, and emerged into the humid Louisiana morning. He was no longer just a father or a veteran. He was a man in the midst of a full-scale tactical retreat. Near the intersection of Linwood Avenue, Shamar spotted his next move. A man was sitting in his vehicle, likely just beginning his Sunday morning, completely unaware that he was in the path of the most wanted man in the state. At gunpoint, Shamar carjacked the vehicle, a desperate, violent pivot to ensure he could stay ahead of the sirens already beginning to wail in the distance. The pursuit began on Linwood Avenue, a jagged, high-speed line that cut through the heart of Shreveport. It wasn't long before the first patrol unit spotted the stolen car. What followed was a terrifying, high-stakes game of physics and adrenaline. With Shamar behind the wheel, the vehicle became a missile, tearing through intersections and eventually screaming across the bridge that separates Shreveport from Bossier City. Police from multiple jurisdictions were now involved, their radios crackling with the news of the massacre back at the house. They weren't just chasing a carjacker. They were chasing the architect of a nightmare. The chase finally reached its boiling point in a quiet residential area on Brompton Lane in Bossier Parish. Shamar brought the vehicle to a halt, but he wasn't surrendering. He stepped out of the driver's side, and in his hands was a weapon that signaled he intended to go down fighting. A rifle-style pistol. Here, the forensic contrast tells the story of the morning's two distinct phases. Inside the house on West 79th Street, investigators would later find a small-caliber handgun, the quiet, intimate tool used to execute a family while they slept. But here, on Brompton Lane, Shamar had switched to a higher capacity, more aggressive platform. He was no longer the silent intruder. He was a combatant. As Shamar leveled the rifle-style pistol toward the wall of officers, the morning air was shattered for the final time. A hail of gunfire from Shreveport officers met him where he stood. There was no negotiation, no final statement. Shamar Elkins was struck multiple times and collapsed onto the pavement. By the time the paramedics reached him, the threat was over. He was pronounced dead at the scene, taking the final Y of the 79th Street massacre to the grave with him. The chase ended on Brompton Lane, but back across the bridge, the real work was just beginning. As the smoke cleared from the shootout, the first responders on West 79th Street were finally entering the bedrooms, beginning a process of recovery that would change their lives and the soul of the city forever.
The vehicle was chased into Bossier Parish, and at which point in time, Shreveport police officers did discharge their firearm, and that individual is deceased. We do believe him to be the only individual that fired gunshots at these locations here.
As the sirens fade into the morning air over Bossier City, the inevitable question begins to haunt the streets of Shreveport. Why? What could possibly lead a man to look into the eyes of 8 children, 7 of them his own, and decide they no longer deserve to draw breath? To find the answer, we have to look at the calendar. Today is Monday, April 20th. For most of the world, it is just the start of another week. But for Shamar Elkins and his wife, Shaniqua, this was supposed to be a day of reckoning. This morning, they were scheduled to walk into a courtroom for a formal separation hearing, a legal threshold that would have codified the end of their marriage and, in Shamar's mind, the end of his control. Family members say the tension hadn't been building for years, but for months, reaching a fever pitch in the final 48 hours. To a man like Shamar, the court date wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was an eviction from the life he believed he owned. But the warning signs weren't just in the legal filings. They were etched into a digital trail of breadcrumbs that Shamar had been leaving for weeks. On April 9th, exactly 10 days before the massacre, he posted a plea on social media that now reads like a chilling prophecy. He didn't ask for money or for his marriage to be saved. Instead, he asked for God to guard his mind. He wrote about negativity arising and dark thoughts trying to settle in. It was a rare public admission of a psychological dam that was about to burst. Then, there is the question of his background. Shamar was a veteran, a former signal support specialist in the Louisiana Army National Guard. He knew how to handle high-stress environments, and more importantly, he knew how to handle a weapon. While there are whispers of undiagnosed PTSD, those who knew the couple best described something more calculated. A pathological need for domestic dominance. For Shamar, if he couldn't be the center of his family's universe, then that universe simply could not exist. But perhaps the most haunting question is how he was even on the street to begin with. We have to look back to 2019, to the gates of Caddo Magnet High School. In a terrifying display of instability, Shamar fired 5 rounds from a handgun while students were active on the playground. It was a clear signal of a man with zero regard for the lives of children. And yet, the system processed him not as a Tier 1 threat, but as a candidate for probation. He walked away with his freedom, and eventually he found his way back to a firearm. The tragedy of the 79th Street massacre isn't just that a father turned into a monster. It's that the monster had been hiding in plain sight for years, in the court records, in the military barracks, and in his own status updates. He told us his mind needed guarding. He showed us he was willing to fire on a schoolyard.
Shreveport police said that they had one previous run-in with Mr. Elkins, but looking back at that history, Jerika, they said there is nothing that would explain anything like what happened here in Shreveport this morning.
Yeah, that community will never be the same.
But on April 19th, when those dark thoughts finally drowned him, he didn't go down alone. He took an entire generation of his own family with him, leaving the rest of us to wonder how many more Shamar Elkinses are currently asking for someone to guard their minds while we wait for the next court date to arrive. The sun has set on the most violent day in the history of Shreveport, leaving behind a silence that no amount of community prayer or police tape can truly fill. As the forensic teams slowly pack away their equipment, and the neighbors begin to place the first few flickering candles on the sidewalk of West 79th Street, the reality of the survivors begins to take center stage. In a nearby ICU, 2 women are currently fighting for every breath. Shaniqua Pugh and the mother of Shamar's other children remain in critical condition, both suffering from traumatic head wounds. They are mothers who went to sleep in a house full of laughter and woke up in a world where that laughter has been permanently silenced. And then, there is the 13-year-old boy. The boy who defied the odds, who climbed into the rain, and who chose the uncertainty of a leap over the certainty of his father's gun. He is the only child survivor from that house of horrors, a young man now tasked with carrying the weight of 8 siblings and cousins who didn't get to make that jump. We often look for meaning in these tragedies, searching for a lesson that makes the loss of 8 children under the age of 12 somehow bearable. But perhaps the only truth to be found is in the failure of Shamar Elkins' ultimate goal. Shamar wanted to erase his lineage. He wanted to delete the lives he felt he could no longer control, attempting to burn the entire book just because he didn't like the final chapter. But he failed. He failed because of a woman's will to survive in a hospital bed. He failed because of a teenager's courage on a slick roof in the dark. The story of the Elkins and Pugh families did not end on that pavement in Bossier City. It lives on in the survivors, in the memories of a city that will never forget their names, and in the hard conversations we must now have about mental health and the cracks in our legal system. Shamar Elkins took his secrets to the grave, but he left behind a legacy of resilience he never intended to create. As we close this case file, we remember the 8 innocent souls who should have been at school this morning, dreaming of their own futures.